Hello Year 5! Today in this video I'm going to be reading chapter 2 of The Day We Met the Queen. Yesterday in the previous video we learnt that the children have been invited to Buckingham Palace to have tea with the Queen, and they were very nervous about presenting to the whole school in assembly. Chapter 2 is called The Revenge That Stunk. Brendan the bully hates Armet and me and Michael, and Tom, and JC. In fact, I think he might hate everyone, but he hates us the most. Because a few weeks ago, he got caught calling Armet so many horrible names that he nearly got expelled. It wasn't our fault that happened, but bullies don't care if things are your fault or not. They just need someone to blame. So Brendan the bully blamed all of us, but he blamed Armet the most. That was why I knew I had to keep a close eye on him and make sure he didn't do anything to ruin the assembly or our trip to see the Queen. When we got into school, we made our way to the classroom. Armet wasn't there, but as we were sitting down at our tables, he ran in and sat next to Miss Hemsey, his special teacher, at the back of the class. I gave him a quick wave and he gave me one back. After that, everything began to feel strange and normal all at the same time. Mrs. Khan started to call the register, just like she always did, but instead of saying, "Here, miss," in bored voices, everyone answered their names in a jumpier way than usual, as if they had ants in their pants that were making them shuffle in their seats and look back at the five of us. I noticed Brendan the bully and his two best friends, Chris and Liam, looking back too, but instead of scrunching up their faces at us like they usually did, they were laughing and whispering. Armet didn't seem to notice that everyone was looking at all of us, but Josie's face was now so red and blotchy that it looked like a pizza, and Michael was sweating so much that even his glasses were steaming up. He also looked as if he was having a competition with Tom to see who could touch his hair the most. Tom kept patting his bright blonde spikes every few seconds as if to check they were still there, and Michael kept poking at his bubbly afro as if wanting to make sure it wasn't melting. I could feel my ears burning and my heart thumping inside them as I waited for Mrs. Khan to finish the register. After what seemed like 3 years, she finally did and told me and Armet and Tom and Josie and Michael that we could leave early and that Mrs. Hemsey could go with us too. We grabbed our notes and our royal invitations, and Armet grabbed his bright red rucksack. It still smelled of old baked beans, even though his foster mum had washed the bag with extra strong washing up liquid at least 9 times. This meant every time Armet picked up his bag, he had to smell that horrible smell and was forced to remember the time when Brendan the bully had poured huge cans of baked beans inside it, just to be mean to someone who was a refugee. I guess there are some bad smells and memories that not even washing up liquid can get rid of. "How are you all feeling?" asked Mrs. Hemsey as we hurried down the corridor towards the main hall. "Okay," said Tom, his voice sounding extra squeaky. We all nodded in agreement, but I knew we weren't really okay at all. Only Armet looked as if he was actually happy and not pretend happy. He was holding his invitation out in front of him carefully, as if it was made of glass, and smiling. I wondered if back in his school in Syria, he was used to doing lots of assemblies. Maybe before the war had started and he had to run away, he had stood on a stage and spoken to his whole school lots of times. I told my brain to remember to ask him later, or to ask Miss Hemsey to ask him for me. "Ah, there you are, kids. Good morning, cried out Mrs. Sanders as we walked through the large double doors leading into the main hall. There were long lines of people with cameras standing in front of all the walls. Mrs. Sanders came over to us and made us walk quickly past the reporters and cameras that were now clicking and flashing and whispering at us. They made Michael so nervous that he tripped up the stairs and Josie nearly dropped her invitation, but they each pretended as if they hadn't done either of those things. We hurried to the side of the stage and stood behind the large red velvet curtains that were hanging there. It felt good to get away from all the shining eyes and lenses, even though I knew they were waiting for us. "Whoa," whispered Tom as he peeked out from behind the curtain. "I've never seen so many cameras, not even when we first got famous." "They are here because the Queen, she is a friend now, yes?" asked Armet, nudging me with his elbow and grinning. I smiled back at him and then peeked out through the curtain too. I wanted to see if there were any reporters that looked like Tintin, because if there were, then maybe they would be nicer to us than the reporters who had made up stories about us when we became famous the first time round. But there wasn't a single reporter that looked like Tintin, not even by a little bit. Most of them were wearing smart suits and shiny shoes and looked like people who worked in banks and offices. I'm pretty sure those kinds of reporters aren't very much fun. If I do ever become a reporter when I grow up, I want to be like Tintin and wear a raincoat and scruffy clothes and go on adventures with a pet dog named Snowy. Only, in my case, the pet will need to be a hamster or a parrot or a boa constrictor or something else that I'm not allergic to, but which can still be clever and save my life when I need it to. And even though I can't have a dog, I still want to be as brave and as friendly to everyone as Tintin is. And I definitely don't want to be like one of the horrible reporters that pick on people. Ever since Ahmet made us famous, I've learned that not all reporters care about being friendly or even about telling the truth. I know because they've called Ahmet things that I don't really understand, but which I can tell right away aren't nice. Words like fraudulent and illegal immigrant, which are grown-up ways of saying they don't like them. Some of them even said mean lines about me and Tom too. But Mum says that we should feel sorry for bad reporters because lying makes their words empty, and one day no one will believe anything they say. I had never thought of words as things that could be full or empty before, but Mum's a librarian who's read at least 59,000 books, so she knows all about everything. After a few minutes, I snuck another look and saw the hall doors opening and classes walking in to fill up the rows of chairs that were waiting for them like train seats. Mrs. Sanders came running up the steps of the stage. "No need to be nervous," she said, peering at us over the top of her glasses. "You'll all be brilliant. Just remember to speak as loudly and as clearly as you can, and most important of all, to have fun." I could hear Michael gulping loudly, as if fun wasn't something he was ever going to have again, and Tom tapping his framed invitation against his knees. I wonder why teachers and parents always tell you to have fun when you're about to do the scariest and most least fun thing you could ever do. "Let's practice one more time," whispered Josie, her face now so red and so blotchy that she looked like a can of minestrone soup. I nodded and, blinking my eyes so that they would focus, got out our list of questions. I looked down at them and hoped they would help me remember everything I had to say. The list looked like this. The 10 most important questions to ask the Queen of England, which we cut down from 52 almost as important questions. Number 1. Have you ever met anyone who's more famous than you? Number 2. What's your favourite football team? Number 3. How heavy is your crown and does it give you a headache when you're wearing it? Number 4. What's your favourite fruit? Number 5. If you weren't the Queen, what would you have wanted to be? Would you have liked to be an astronaut maybe, because of all the star medals you wear? Number 6. Who's the Lord Chamberlain that wrote your invitations, and can you do his job, even if you have bad handwriting? Number 7. How does it feel using money and stamps and things with your face on it? And do you like your picture, or do you wish you could change it? Number 8. Have you ever been to Disneyland, and did you get to go on all the rides for free because you're the Queen? Number 9. How many handbags do you have, and which one would you take with you if you had to run away from a war? Number 10. Will you help more children like Ahmet stay safe and find their families until all the wars end? "Okay, you lot, ready?" asked Mrs. Sanders, and before any of us could shake our heads with a yes or a no, she stepped out onto the stage and, clapping her hands, shouted, "Quiet, everyone!" Instantly, the hall fell silent. "Good morning, school!" Everyone shouted back, "Good morning, Mrs. Sanders!" Mrs. Sanders nodded proudly and, clasping her hands together, looked out at everyone. "Tomorrow, as you all know, 5 of your fellow students will be off to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen and join her for what I imagine will be a rather wonderful tea." Someone cried out, "Woohoo!" which made everyone else giggle. "Yes, woohoo indeed," said Mrs. Sanders, smiling. "Now, Ahmet and his friends have been invited to meet the Queen because they did something extraordinarily brave and kind to help each other. And since we are a school of sanctuary, which means we value acts of kindness and courage, I am sure you are all as proud of your fellow schoolmates as I am. So instead of me boring you with all the details, I'm going to ask them to come out to tell you all about it and show you the messages they have received from the Queen. Everyone began to clap and cheer and whoop, and Mrs. Sanders waved us out onto the stage. My ears felt like they were full of cotton wool, and my head was fizzing like a big ball of electricity, and I followed Ahmet out and stood next to him. I looked out, but instead of seeing faces I knew, I saw an ocean of eyeballs blinking back at me. Ahmet, you're first. Off you go, said Mrs. Sanders. She gave him a little pat and walked off to the side of the stage. I watched as Ahmet looked over his shoulder at Miss Hemsey, who was giving him a double thumbs up. He took a step forward. Flicking his hair out of the way, he looked out at the school with his grey-brown lion eyes and opened his mouth. Tomorrow I will go and I will see the Queen of England, he shouted, because she invite me to her house. He took another step forward and held up the invitation, showing everyone the message the Queen had sent him. His invitation was different from the rest of ours because after his name, the Queen had written, "The bravest refugee boy I know," after it. In Syria, when we go to friend's house, we bring... Ahmet stopped and tried to remember the word he needed. Everyone waited, and I could feel my mouth wanting to yell the word out for him. "Gifts!" shouted Ahmet, suddenly remembering. "We bring gifts of sweets and chocolates, so we can share with tea. So when I meet Queen, I will give her sweets with lemon so she can share, and I will show her this." Ahmet lifted up his rucksack and held it up. I could see some people were frowning and whispering and looking very confused, but they felt quiet when Ahmet opened his mouth again. This bag came with me from Syria, and it was a gift from my dad. So I think Queen will like to see it, and I will let her hold it so she can see everything inside it, and I will not tell her to smell it. "Ew!" screeched a girl from the back of the class. "Ugh!" cried a boy a second later. "What's that smell?" yelled someone else in the middle of the hall. The whole hall turned to look in different directions as people began to jump up from their seats with their hands over their mouths. They were squealing. "Stink bomb!" came the answer from someone near the back, and instantly everyone who hadn't already stood up jumped from their seats. In less than a second, the whole hall had changed from a sea of eyes to a blurry rush of bodies running in different directions as teachers and children tried to get away from the disgusting smell. But there wasn't just one disgusting smell. There were lots. Every few seconds, a new wave of terrible smells seemed to be coming from a different part of the hall. Mrs. Sanders had run back onto the stage and was trying to hold her nose and tell people to calm down at the same time. "I'm going to die!" came a cry. "We gotta get out of here!" shouted a boy with his school jumper over his head. Miss, look!" screamed a girl, pointing at the boy next to her, who had begun to heave and howl as if there was a river about to burst out of him. "He's going to be sick!" I know me and Josie and Tom and Michael and Ahmet should have moved and run too, but we couldn't. It was as if our feet were superglued to the floor and our eyes couldn't stop staring. It was strange watching everything from high up on the stage, even though we could smell the horrible smells. It felt as if we weren't a part of the school anymore, and all we could do was stand and watch as everyone screamed and ran in different directions and crashed into each other like bumper cars. "Order!" shouted Mrs. Sanders, clapping her hands together and trying not to cough. From around the hall we could see teachers pushing past the shocked reporters and frantically opening doors and windows. "Teachers, take your classes back in an orderly fashion to your classrooms, quickly please." Another stink bomb puffed into the air, making everyone squeal again, although now some of the squeals sounded more excited and happy than shocked and disgusted. As the classes left line by line, Mrs. Sanders hurried over to us. "I'm sorry, children. You'll have to get back to class. Assembly is over, I'm afraid." "Oh," said Tom, sounding disappointment. "That sucks." "We are not telling anyone about this?" asked Ahmet, looking at me. His lion eyes were getting bigger and bigger, and I knew he was feeling upset. I shook my head, feeling sorry for him. "No, I'm afraid not, Ahmet. Now off you go." Mrs. Sanders was patting Ahmet on the arm gently. Miss Hemsley came to lead us out through the invisible clouds of smells. By now, most of the reporters were running out too. Some of them were even pushing past the classes in front of them to get out of the hall quicker. As we left the stage and hurried out behind Miss Hemsley, I felt a tickle at the back of my neck. Sometimes you can just tell right away when someone is staring at you. It's like an invisible hand giving the back of your head a push. Sometimes the push can be a friendly one, but most of the time the push is a surprising and scary one, especially when the stare contains a bad feeling like the one I was getting right then. So I looked over my shoulder, and as I did, my eyes bumped straight into the bright, shining blue eyes of Brendan the bully, and I knew right away by the big smirk that he had done it. He had let off all the stink bombs somehow and had got his revenge on Ahmet by spoiling our special Royal Assembly. I didn't know how he had done it. He hadn't moved from his chair in the middle of our class row, and Chris and Liam had stayed next to him too, so he must have used something special to make the whole school stink. Maybe he had a super special remote control gadget, or had people to help him on the other side of the hall. However he had done it, I knew I had to find out what else he had planned and stop him from doing anything to ruin our tea with the Queen. That's the end of chapter 2. Poor children, Brendan has really ruined their assembly. So now I think I know why chapter 2 is called The Revenge That Stunk. Okay, I'm going to read chapter 3 in my next video. Bye.